This is that 1936 Gibson EH-150, and the amp itself is all done. And later in this video, you'll get a chance to hear Joe Restivo put this through its paces with an old Gibson ES-150 Charlie Christian, maybe even an old ES-250. The output transformer was bad, so it has got a Haybor for a Tweed Deluxe, which is comparable in all specs, using the 8-ohm and the 4-ohm taps. So when you plug in an external speaker here, it goes to the 4-ohm tap. Otherwise, it goes to the internal speaker by itself using the 8-ohm tap. And once all this was changed out, that cap that they had between the two grids was no longer necessary to keep it from oscillating. So that is gone. You saw in the previous videos that I changed out a cap over here that was just 80 years old and had worn out. A lot of this is just cleaning. The speaker was the big delay on this. The field coil speaker had been reconed in the past, but it was really buzzy and rattly and odd. I took it to Dave Halford, and he opened it up. And inside here, the field coil and then going to the spider and the voice coil and all that, there are a lot of old rubber parts that over the years had ossified and were just crumbly. And they were just buzzing around and rattling in there. And when it was reconed, apparently the spider was done improperly. Dave rebuilt it. So it's the original voice coil, it's our original field coil, did the new spider and gasket and basket and all that fun stuff. All the internal workings are made as new while it's still, the original speaker. And it's all working very well. And I can put it all back together in its chassis, which I'll begin to do right now. And here it is all put together in the cabinet. I have not secured it with the screws yet. I'll do that in just a moment. Let's see here. We've got a 6F5 and a 6C5 that have been changed out. The old ones are here. This was actually a 6.7 something that was in the incorrect tube here. So this has been changed and this has been changed. It still has slightly mismatched power tubes. They seem to be fine. There might be a slight hum. So I'll talk to the owner and see whether he wants me to get another pair that are balanced and matched. But they are working. There's just a very slight hum, which I think is just due to a mismatch. But other than that, the amp sounds really good. And now you get the chance to hear it.
This is, according to, I'm not the owner of this instrument. But according to the owner, this is a 1939. And the reason I clarify that is I know dating with Gibson guitars, pre-war guitars, can be a little wonky. But according to him, it's a 1939 ES-150. We know that. This is one of the main or first production guitars you could buy with a pickup. And that's what everybody fancies about this guitar. And I know they've become very in vogue lately. Growing up as a kid, we're about the same age. You could find these things for pretty cheap. But nowadays they're highly sought after, especially ones that are in quality condition. And I would put this in good, excellent, maybe. It is, but the thing that everybody likes about it is the Charlie Christian, what they call the Charlie Christian pickup. And I have to say, this is my first time. I've played these guitars, over the years. I've come across them. But this is the first time I've ever had the opportunity to spend, like a couple days. I did a gig yesterday with this thing. And so I've really gotten to kind of feel what this instrument is like in a real-time setting. This particular model is in good shape. You can see the back is pretty clean. The top is fairly clean. There's some dinging, but for a guitar this age, not too bad. There's some nasty scratching there, but other than that, this guitar's in really good shape. It plays excellent. It's been set up. Has been refretted.
The tuners look like they might have been.
The tuners don't look original to me either. And maybe even this tailpiece, I'm curious that this doesn't original.
I wish people could reach through the computer and feel that neck. That V is just perfect.
Well, that has been a very interesting, especially when it's one thing to look at these things and maybe even play it at a guitar store, but to take it to a gig, And I played a set of music with it yesterday, and I actually made a video. And if I don't know, maybe you can link to it. I put a video of me playing Stomping at the Savoy with my quartet.
I'd be delighted to.
Yeah.
Especially as I was at the Savoy 2 weeks ago. So.
Nice. And it's a real example of this instrument with a quartet, with a group, with a drummer and a bass player and a saxophone player. But the V profile is something else. And I have to say, after about a set, I was pretty taxed. Mm-hmm. And I went back to my Johnny Smith, which has my 61 Johnny Smith, which is a 60s slimmer profile. But one thing, and I was talking with my saxophone player yesterday, and we were talking about, vintage instruments, especially pre-war instruments. It definitely gets you into the vibe of this period, and it kind of forces you maybe into some things. I mean, if people aren't familiar with it, and you can't, I don't think a video is going to be able to do justice, but essentially these 1930s instruments, and I have a Recording King, a 34 Recording King acoustic archtop, and its V is softer than this. This is a pretty pointed V, and when we say V, it is the back of the neck has a point to it. So when if you're trying to do thumb stuff, or it can be a little, like I said, it was a little taxing on my thumb after a set of music. But I have to say, I know there's a lot of people I would recommend people that are experts in this stuff. I would recommend Nick Rossi in San Francisco. There's another guy in the California area named Jonathan Stout, who are experts in these instruments and in this music. They play these instruments, they own them. Matt Monasteri is another expert in this music. I think he's New York based. But I have to say, I get it now. I mean, the Charlie Christian pickup, especially playing in a jazz context, or even in a blues context, and maybe we'll talk about, because when I think about this guitar, I definitely think about the early T-Bone recordings too. There is something about the projection and especially the mids projection and the highs too. We're just tight and just playing up the neck, and we'll do some demonstrations, but playing up the neck, I was just really satisfied. Like when I would go for notes up in the upper part of the register, they just jumped out. And I was like, wow, that's great. It did all the things you want to do if you're playing a jazz box clean. All the notes really, and you didn't have any problematic lows. You didn't have any flabby lows. You didn't have any low frequencies that muddied up the character. Everything just, it was like, oh, this is why these guys use these things over and over and over and over. And I think of even someone like Howard Roberts, and I think was using his all the way up into the 1960s. And some of those Howard Roberts.
I've tried one. I've tried pickups in Tellys or in Les Paul Juniors.
I have too, but this, and I've heard people say like, yeah, you can buy these aftermarket Charlie Christian pickups, and you can put them in your Telecasters, you can put them in wherever in a solid body guitar. And even the aftermarket, these guys that are reproing them, or even the 1977 repros, because there was a short run of Gibson made a short run 175 with a Charlie Christian pickup. But everybody says, yeah, but not quite. It doesn't quite do what the pre-war ones do.
Yeah.
Now Tara Farlow, from what I understand, was playing this model on the Great Red Norvo Trio sessions in the late 1940s. But I think even after that, when he went to a bigger model, 350, he had his front pickup replaced with the Charlie Christian. Jimmy Rainey famously played one of these for years and years and years and years. A great bebop guitarist. Oscar Moore, who was Nat Cole's guitarist. If you're not heard of these people, check them out. Oscar Moore is highly underrated, and I think is one of the greatest American guitar players. Period, not just jazz guitar players in popular music. He played one of these. Obviously, Charlie Christian, with the name, we really think of these instruments connected with him. He would then eventually went to a 250, a bigger model. And the owner of this guitar has a 250 as well, and it has and I've played it, and it's a little different vibe. But and then T-Bone Walker, the great blues guitar player, because a lot of people associate him with the ES-5, and for good reason, because he did play the ES-5 in the 1950s. But in the 1940s, he played a 150 and he played a 250. So some of those classic T-Bone cuts, it's really this pickup. you know, Charlie Christian is this young phenom, but kind of country. I mean, like literally wearing like a 10-gallon hat, country guy who is, you know, watching Ernest Shamblin and seeing the Bob Wills Texas Playboys, or you know, there's this connection between the Texas swing, country and western swing, and then you've got, of course, what's going on in swing music with like Count Basie or Duke Ellington, you know, all the great big bands of the day. And he gets brought up to New York to go play with this surly man, Benny Goodman, if you ever hear any stories about him, but who also was leading probably the most popular jazz, commercially successful jazz group, jazz artist in the country. So it's like, you know, it's like joining the Rolling Stones, you know, what's Mick Taylor.
Mick Taylor, yeah.
It's like, oh, I'm suddenly in the biggest rock band in the world. I mean, obviously this stuff's not apples and apples, you know, but you get the point. He's suddenly thrust in this like major group, and he plays the electric guitar. It's a new thing. So it is a, you know, go back and listen to those recordings, the Benny Goodman recordings in particular, and you're gonna really, you know, and I've done that recently and gone back and listened to some of those classic recordings, and like, if you're able to switch off what you know in your brain about, you know, the history of recorded music, you know, up to, you know, after this period, if you can kind of try to get yourself into that space of what was going on at that time, it is a odd sound. It's a new sound.
Yeah.
It's a new sound. And I've heard people say, there's a great Barney Kessel interview that someone, I think it was Nick Rossi, posted. And Barney Kessel was saying, he was like, people didn't know what it was. Like, people would be outside the club and he'd be playing, and they didn't know what is that? They didn't know what the instrument was. They didn't know it was a guitar. They thought it was maybe a tenor saxophone or some kind of other instrument. These two things actually are kind of a revolutionary combination in modern American music.
Well,
I think we could say that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now I'm gonna have to play it, so let's hear this bad boy. All right, so like, you know, you might do, if like, That's cool.
That's all the way up, which means you have total control over the guitar now.
Yeah, and that's that was about an 8.
Yeah,
This is
that-
10. If you're getting into this style, don't underestimate, learning the notes and learning the theory behind it, or learning the solos and all that stuff's great, and getting the right guitar. If you can afford one of these things, they're not cheap these days. If you can find these instruments, great. But the man swung his ass off, period. And I haven't heard anybody who does this style emulate that. Not one person.
That's hard.
I'm sorry.
That's hard to say.
And there's some great players out there, but Charlie Christian swung, and I don't know if this is kids are watching, but he swung his dang what off. And anybody that you read who played with him, non-guitar players, they're just like, yeah, it was, I think Thelonious Monk said, yeah, I can't really listen to any other guitar players. He kind of ruined it for me, because he was so good.